In the soft hush of morning at Whispering Pines Wildlife Sanctuary, 3 bobcat cubs were quietly rescued from the shadows of the illegal wildlife trade. But their mother, she did not survive. The cubs were brought into care, but something in them had gone still. They barely moved. They would not eat. The loss had closed them off, leaving only silence in its place. Days passed. Gentle hands tried, then tried again. But when familiar methods failed, and the light of hope began to dim, a quiet idea was born. They introduced Daisy, a rescue dog, calm and nurturing, and a new mother herself. Perhaps she could offer what the cubs had lost. Could a dog, with no wild instincts, truly step into the space left behind by a bobcat mother? What began as a final attempt slowly turned into something else. A fragile, growing bond, quietly rewriting what was thought possible in the world of animal rescue. This is the story of that bond. Of Daisy, the gentle soul, and the 3 cubs she dared to comfort. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe if you have not already, and tap the notification bell, so you never miss a story like this one. The morning sun had barely risen over the ridges surrounding Whispering Pines Wildlife Sanctuary when Emily Johnson's phone began to ring. At 58, Emily had spent over 3 decades in wildlife rehabilitation. She had seen heartbreak, miracles, and everything in between. But the urgency in Ranger Mike's voice told her this was something else. "We have 3 bobcat kittens, Emily. Tiny things. Found with a man trying to sell them at a truck stop just outside Tucson." His voice wavered. "We lost the mother. She was badly dehydrated and injured when they got to her." Emily closed her eyes. Her hand, lined and strong, tightened around the phone. Another loss. Another victim of the illegal pet trade, growing unchecked in the border regions of Arizona. "How old?" she asked, already thinking through formula mixes, heating pads, and where she could make space. "Maybe 4 weeks," Mike said. "They are not eating, Emily. None of them. Vet says they are fading fast." 30 minutes later, Emily stood in the sanctuary's small exam room, looking down at 3 fragile bundles of spotted fur, each small enough to rest in her palm. Their eyes were open, cloudy blue-gray, barely aware. Their tiny bodies trembled, thin with fear and hunger. The smallest one, a female, marked by a faint white patch on her ear, let out a soft, broken cry. It hung in the still air like it did not know where to land. "Oh, little ones," Emily whispered, brushing a fingertip along the kitten's head. It flinched, gave a weak hiss. "I know you miss her. I am so sorry." For 3 days, Emily tried everything. Bottles were refused. Syringes only brought panic. The stress overwhelmed their small bodies. One of the males had a seizure. They curled into themselves in the corner of their enclosure, 3 quiet shapes in a world too loud. Their eyes lost their light, hour by hour. On the 4th morning, Emily sat in her office. Her head rested in her hands. The week's financial reports lay untouched on the desk. The sanctuary was her whole life, built from the land her grandfather left her, held together by her hands and heart. She was almost 60 now. Her face bore every chapter of every rescue. Her hair had long turned silver, pulled back in the same neat ponytail each morning. Her palms were rough from years of work that never really ended. A soft knock came at the door. Her granddaughter Lizzie stepped in, carrying a mug of coffee. She was 22. Sharp-eyed. Steady. Her green eyes mirrored Emily's, but her methods came from newer books, newer thinking. "You did not sleep again, did you, Gran?" she said gently, setting the cup down. Emily let out a tired breath. "They will not make it, Lizzie. I have tried everything. Everything." Lizzie sat on the edge of the desk, her voice thoughtful. "Not everything, Gran. What about Daisy?" Emily looked up, startled. "Daisy? She is not even a year old. And she is a dog. A rescue mutt?" Lizzie nodded. "One who just weaned her litter 3 weeks ago. She is still lactating. And Gran, she is the gentlest soul I have ever met. It is too dangerous." Emily started. But Lizzie was already shaking her head. "More dangerous than letting them fade away? You always told me, sometimes in rehab, we try what seems impossible." Emily stared at her, the words pulling something from memory. Her old mentor, Dr. Thompson, had said it once, years ago, when they had paired an orphaned hawk with a foster father. Sometimes, nature just needs a nudge, he had told her. A little help to connect the dots. Bring Daisy, Emily said at last. But we go slow. Very slow. Daisy had come to the sanctuary in winter. A pregnant stray, found half frozen in a drainage ditch after a rare storm. No one knew what she was, a mix of shepherd, maybe retriever, with warm golden fur and kind, patient eyes. She gave birth in the clinic. Raised her puppies with gentle care. Every single one had found a home in the nearby town of Pine Creek. And Daisy had stayed. She followed Emily on her rounds. Sat quietly beside injured deer, waited outside fox dens, never hurried, never loud. Emily had planned to find her a home. Somehow, that plan kept getting postponed. Now, Daisy was led into the room next to the cub's enclosure. Emily sat on the floor. In her lap, the smallest kitten was wrapped in a towel. Its breath was shallow. Its tiny frame still cold, despite the heated blanket. "Easy, Daisy," Emily said softly as Lizzie opened the door. "Easy, girl." Daisy's nose twitched the moment she entered. Her ears lifted, alert but calm. She walked in slowly, her tail giving uncertain, delicate wags. When she reached Emily, she lowered her head and gently sniffed at the small bundle wrapped in the towel. The kitten stirred, let out a faint hiss, a sound that seemed to use the last of its strength. Emily held her breath, ready to separate them at the first sign of tension. But what happened next, she would never forget. Daisy whined softly. It was the same sound she used when she searched for her puppies. She lay down beside Emily. Slowly. Carefully. Her head reached forward, and she began to lick the kitten with slow, steady strokes, gentle and instinctive. The kitten, instead of recoiling, grew still. Then, after a long pause, it turned toward the warmth of Daisy's fur. "Gran," Lizzie whispered. Her voice was quiet, eyes wide. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she carefully lowered the kitten closer. Daisy curled around it at once, continuing to groom the tiny creature as if it had always been hers. "Let us try the others," Emily said, her voice almost a whisper. One by one, they brought the remaining kittens in. And each time, the same quiet miracle unfolded. Daisy welcomed them, one after another, tucking them against her body, cleaning them gently, patiently. Within the hour, all three were nestled at her side. And to Emily's amazement, they began to nurse. "It will not be perfect nutrition," she murmured, watching as the kittens suckled with weak but growing determination. "We will still need to supplement with formula. If they will take it. But this connection might save them." Lizzie reached over and gently squeezed her grandmother's shoulder. "Sometimes love is the medicine they need most. You are the one who taught me that." What followed over the next week defied every expectation Emily had carried into her career. The kittens began to thrive. They gained weight. Their fur grew brighter. Their eyes, once clouded and dim, now held flickers of curiosity. Daisy remained with them always. She groomed them. Moved them gently by the scruff when they wandered. Gave quiet warnings when they played too rough. The sanctuary staff began to call them Patch, the female with the white ear. Scout, the larger male. And Rascal, the smallest, quickest to explore. And Daisy. Daisy seemed to know them. Each one. She responded to their individual voices, their movements, as if they had been her own from the start. Emily documented everything. Photos. Videos. Notes on behavior. This kind of bond, this interspecies adoption, was unlike anything she had witnessed before. And she understood the weight of it. What it could mean for future rehabilitation work. By the time the kittens reached 8 weeks, they were on solid food. A careful mix of formula and small pieces of appropriate meat. Still, each night, they curled against Daisy's body, just as they had on the first day. Their play shifted, more feline now. Pouncing. Climbing. Hiding. Practicing instincts rooted deep in their nature. And Daisy watched it all. Quietly. Patiently. Sometimes she joined in, but most often, she simply waited, ready when they needed to come back to her. "Their instincts are intact," Emily told Dr. Rivera during one of his regular visits. "They are stalking. testing boundaries, developing right on schedule. Dr. Rivera, a man in his 40s who had given his life to wildlife medicine, examined Scout carefully. He nodded. Physically, they are doing very well. No signs of human imprinting, which is essential. But I am concerned about their attachment to Daisy. They cannot stay with the dog forever. Emily nodded slowly. She had known this conversation was coming. The sanctuary's purpose had always been rehabilitation. Release, when possible. And when it was not, proper placement in licensed facilities. Wild animals did not belong in long-term sanctuary life. We will cross that bridge when we reach it, she said softly, watching as Scout leapt from the table and ran toward Daisy, who waited patiently across the room. For now, she is giving them what they need. Dr. Rivera hesitated. Just remember, the longer this bond lasts, the harder the separation will be. For all of them. By the time the kittens were 4 months old, they had become quiet stars of the sanctuary. Volunteers watched them from a distance, careful not to interfere, as the young bobcats practiced pouncing on leaves, each other's tails, and the edges of shadow. Daisy was still with them. Not as a mother now, but something gentler, a guardian, a safe place to return to. Emily knew the moment was near. Their baby coats were fading. The soft blue of their kitten eyes turning into the golden amber of wild adulthood. Nature was beginning its quiet nudge toward independence. We have heard from the Mountain Wildlife Preserve, Lizzie told her one evening, as the sun slipped low behind the trees. They sat on the cabin porch, warm mugs in hand, watching the sky burn orange above the pines. They have a strong bobcat program. Big habitat. Good educational support. And they are willing to keep the 3 of them together. Emily nodded, the weight of it sitting quietly in her chest. It is a good place. Better than most. But we will need to start the separation soon. They should begin to spend time away from Daisy, before the transfer. The first separation attempt was made during the morning meal. While the bobcats were distracted with their food, Daisy was quietly taken to Emily's cabin, a quarter mile from their enclosure. The reaction was immediate, and heartbreaking. Within minutes the bobcats began pacing. Sharp, high-pitched calls rang out across the sanctuary, echoing off the trees. They ignored their food. Scratched at doors. Huddled together in the far corner of the enclosure, tense and confused. But the most painful reaction came from Daisy. She howled at the door. Low, mournful cries that did not stop. Her paws scratched at the wood until they were red and raw. This is not working, Lizzie said quietly, after 4 long hours of growing distress. Their stress levels are too high. Patch has not stopped calling since we moved Daisy. Emily watched from the observation window. In the middle of the enclosure, Patch, the smallest, sat alone. Her head lifted, releasing one trembling call after another into the quiet morning air. Bring Daisy back, Emily said at last. We will try something slower. The reunion was emotional. Daisy ran into the enclosure, tail wagging, nose searching. The 3 bobcats rushed to meet her, chirping, purring, rubbing against her legs and sides, checking every part of her as if making sure she was real. Then, one by one, they curled against her and exhaled, quiet, trembling breaths of relief. Emily and Lizzie exchanged a look. The bond was even deeper than they had known. Over the next 2 weeks, they tried different strategies. Brief separations. Adjacent enclosures. Gradual increases in distance. But nothing helped. The moment Daisy was gone, the bobcats grew anxious. Withdrawn. Depressed. And Daisy, she mourned each separation with visible pain. I have never seen anything like it, Emily said to Dr. Rivera over the phone. Her voice was low, uncertain. It is like they have forgotten they are different species. They have formed something real. A family. It has happened before, Dr. Rivera replied thoughtfully. There are documented cases of unusual interspecies bonds. The question is, what gives them the best long-term outcome? That question came to the forefront when representatives from the Mountain Wildlife Preserve arrived to evaluate the bobcats for transfer. Thomas Wilkins, the preserve's lead zoologist, spent an entire day watching the animals. He observed in silence, taking careful notes. That evening, he sat across from Emily in her office. They are strong, well-developed, In excellent condition, he said, reviewing his notes. But I have real concerns about separating them from the dog. The stress could undo their progress. So you will not take them? Emily asked, a strange mix of disappointment and relief in her voice. Wilkins rubbed his beard, thinking. I did not say that. What if we took the dog too? Emily stared at him. You are not serious. She is not a wild animal. She is a domestic dog. She belongs in a home. Hear me out, Wilkins said, leaning forward. We have staff housing on site. One of our senior keepers, Maria, has been looking for a companion animal. What if Daisy lived with her? She would have a home. And supervised access to the bobcats daily. Over time, we could reduce contact. Slowly. Let them grow into independence. It was unconventional. But the more Emily thought about it, the more it made sense. The preserve had the space, the resources, and the experience. And most importantly, it would protect the emotional and physical well-being of all 4 animals. After long discussions, a meeting with the sanctuary board, and a heartfelt video call with Maria herself, Emily gave her answer. Yes. The day of the move was quiet. Bittersweet. Emily and Lizzie traveled with the animals, riding in the transport van alongside Daisy and the crated bobcats. Daisy stayed close to the crates, lying beside them, occasionally letting out soft, reassuring whines. She knew something was changing. The Mountain Wildlife Preserve was vast. Set deep in the Colorado Rockies, it offered winding trails, forested habitats, and teams of dedicated wildlife professionals. Maria met them at the gates. In her 30s, warm and grounded, she greeted Daisy first, kneeling, offering her hand, speaking softly. Emily watched closely. There was trust in the way Daisy responded. They will have 3 acres of forested space, Maria explained as she walked them toward the new enclosure. We designed it to support natural behaviors while still allowing observation and gentle care. The bobcats' introduction to their new home went smoother than anyone had dared hope. With Daisy by their side, they stepped cautiously into unfamiliar territory, their movements careful but curious. By sunset, all 3 had begun climbing the carefully arranged logs and exploring the rocky outcrops, Daisy watching from below with quiet, attentive eyes. That evening, when it was time for Daisy to return to Maria's cabin for the night, Emily braced herself for what she feared would be a repeat of past separations. But something had shifted. Perhaps it was the new setting, or the distraction of their expansive habitat. The bobcats called for Daisy a few times, but the anxiety was softer, less desperate. I think they know, Maria said gently, that this is their place now, and that Daisy will come back. Over the next 6 months, Emily received regular updates. She visited the preserve when she could. And each time, she left with quiet wonder at how well the transition had gone. The bobcats flourished. They grew into strong, healthy subadults. Daisy, too, adjusted easily to her new life. She found comfort in the routine with Maria, and still spent part of each day with her unusual little family. As time passed, something natural began to occur. The bobcats remained happy to see Daisy, but they no longer needed her the way they once had. Their independence was blooming. They explored more, played more, practiced hunting skills in the quiet of the forested enclosure. By their first birthday, they had become magnificent young adults. And while their bond with Daisy remained, it had shifted, no longer rooted in survival, but in companionship. What happened 18 months later, though, caught everyone by surprise. It began with a phone call. Scout is sick, Emily, Maria said, her voice tight. Dr. Mendez thinks it is a bacterial infection. He is not responding to treatment. And he will not eat. Emily, now 60, had been thinking about retirement. But she was not ready, not when it came to them. These bobcats had become some of the most meaningful cases of her long career. How bad is it? She asked. Bad enough, Maria said. He has withdrawn to the corner of the quarantine enclosure. He will not let anyone near him. Not even me. Emily did not hesitate. I am coming. And bring Daisy to him. Right away. The drive to Colorado felt longer than ever before. When Emily arrived, Scout had been ill for 3 days. His condition had worsened. Despite every effort, he refused food. grew weaker. We cannot give him more sedation, Dr. Mendez explained as they walked together toward the veterinary building. He needs to take medication orally. But he will not touch anything. Outside the quarantine room, Maria was waiting. Daisy sat beside her, alert and tense. The golden fur around her muzzle had lightened with age, but her eyes still held the same soft intelligence. She knows, Maria said. She has been whining at the door since Scout got sick. Through the glass, Emily could see Scout curled tightly in the far corner. His coat was dull. His breathing shallow. He looked smaller now, fragile in a way Emily had not seen since he was a kitten. Let Daisy in, Emily said gently. Let her try. They fitted Daisy with a secure harness and opened the door with care. She stepped in slowly, her nose working, her posture calm and deliberate. She saw him immediately. She let out a soft whine. Not loud. Not urgent. Just familiar. Scout raised his head. For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes, then recognition. He made a sound. Not quite a chuff. Not quite a meow. But a sound Emily remembered well. A greeting. A memory. Daisy crossed the room without hesitation. She lay down beside him. And with the same slow, loving rhythm she had used years before, she began to groom his face. The room went still. Scout did not pull away. When Dr. Mendez stepped forward with a bowl of broth laced with antibiotics, Scout, who had rejected everything, leaned forward and began to drink. I will be damned, the doctor whispered. For the next 3 days, Daisy barely left Scout's side. She lay with him, nuzzled him, gave him the steady presence of something known. Something trusted. With Daisy there, Scout accepted food. Took his medicine. Slowly, his strength returned. When Patch and Rascal were brought in for a brief visit, the room filled with a quiet sense of reunion. 3 grown bobcats, and the dog who had once saved their lives, together again in a moment of quiet need. Scout's recovery was slow, but steady. By the end of the week, he was eating, moving, healing. The infection responded to treatment. And for the first time in days, his prognosis was no longer uncertain. It is remarkable. Dr. Mendez stood beside Emily, watching quietly as Scout took his first careful steps around the quarantine enclosure. Daisy walked beside him, matching his pace, her presence calm and steady. I have worked with wildlife for over 20 years, the doctor said softly. I have never seen anything quite like this. Emily nodded, her eyes still on the pair. Love, she said simply. It transcends species. She had seen many things over the decades. But this was something she would carry with her. When Scout was finally strong enough to return to the main habitat, Maria made a quiet suggestion. I think Daisy should go with him, she said. Just for today. To help him settle back in. It was unorthodox. But after all they had witnessed, the preserve's director gave his approval. With gentle supervision, Daisy accompanied Scout back to the habitat where Patch and Rascal waited. Emily watched from the observation deck, hands resting on the railing. She would never forget what she saw. As Scout stepped into the enclosure, the other 2 bobcats approached. Their reunion was quiet but unmistakable. Purrs, soft head bumps, the kind of recognition that needed no words. Then something remarkable happened. All 3 bobcats moved toward Daisy. Without prompting. Without hesitation. They gathered around her, just as they had in the early days, each one finding a place beside her, resting lightly against her sides. For several long minutes, they simply existed there, this family that should not have been, but was. Wild and domestic. Feline and canine. A bond born of desperation, sustained by something that had no name but one. Love. This, Emily whispered to Lizzie, who had flown in as soon as she heard Scout was ill. This is why I have done this work for so many years. Moments like this. Moments that remind us that healing does not always come from medicine. Sometimes, it comes from connection. From care. From being there when nothing else seems to reach. In the years that followed, the relationship between Daisy and her bobcat family changed, but never faded. As the bobcats matured into full-grown adults, their need for constant contact softened. But their bond with Daisy endured. Daisy, older now but still strong in spirit, continued her daily visits. No longer as a mother, but as something equally important. A presence. A companion. A comfort. Together, the sanctuary and the preserve published a paper detailing the case. It became a landmark example in the field of wildlife rehabilitation, proof of what was possible when compassion and open-minded care meet. Emily, who finally retired at 65, often shared the story in her lectures to young rehabilitators. Sometimes, she would say, showing slides of Daisy curled up beside her bobcats, the most powerful medicine is not something you give through a needle or prepare in a lab. Sometimes it is connection. It is meeting a need so deep, so essential, that it bridges the spaces we think cannot be crossed. And on quiet evenings, when she returned to visit the preserve, Emily would find them. Daisy, now elderly, her muzzle fully white, resting near the fence. And just beyond it, the 3 bobcats, grown, strong, wild. But never far from her side. Still a family. Still together. Despite everything that should have kept them apart. The unthinkable, Emily would whisper, remembering that first hesitant conversation with Lizzie. Sometimes the unthinkable is exactly what is needed. In the golden light of sunset, wild and domestic, rescued and rescuer, they remained. A family, in the truest sense of the word. A quiet, enduring testament to the healing power of love without boundaries.